Hi, you guys. Welcome back to another edition of History Tea with Professor T. I'm Professor T, and that T stands for Professor Tracy Daniel. And in this edition, we discuss the Yalta and Potsdam conferences. So I really wanted to take a moment to discuss these conferences with you guys because they provide such necessary context for what's going to happen next, for what we discuss next, which is the Cold War. So let's go ahead and get started with discussing the Yalta Conference. Now, while both of these conferences take place in 1945, they take place at different or different times, or different months rather, in 1945. Yalta takes place February 4th through 11th, 1945, and this is a meeting of world leaders during World War II to discuss the post-war world. So it's the meeting of the big three. And who are the big three? The United States, represented by President Franklin Roosevelt, Great Britain, who is represented by Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and the Soviet Union, which is represented by Premier Joseph Stalin. So by the time we get to the Yalta Conference, which again is February 4th through 11th, 1945, Allied leaders are pretty confident that they're going to have an Allied victory in Europe. And at this point, the United States and Great Britain really see an advantage of having Soviet aid in the war in the Pacific, aka the war against Japan. Now, they also decided at this conference that France would get some type of governing power in post war Germany, and they also decided that Germany would be responsible for paying post war reparations, just like they had been with the Versailles Treaty at the end of World War I. Now, at the end of Yalta, of the Yalta Conference, the big three agreed to meet again after Germany surrendered in Europe. So, a couple of months later, in April 1945, Franklin Delano Roosevelt succumbs of a stroke, and his vice president, Harry Truman, becomes president of the United States. Now, the Truman administration will clash with the Soviet Union over their influence in Eastern Europe. And so, fast forward another month to May 1945. Germany surrendered May 8th, 1945, and at this point, the lack of a common enemy in Europe really led to, I would say, a breakdown, or it led to difficulties in the big three reaching a consensus concerning Reconstruction in Europe. So we get to Potsdam. The Potsdam Conference occurs July 17th through August 2nd, 1945, after Germany surrenders in Europe. And it's held in Potsdam, Germany. And the purpose of the Potsdam Conference was to negotiate the terms for the end of World War II. So, who is present at the Potsdam Conference? The big three are present. Again, you have Premier Joseph Stalin of the Soviet Union, you have Prime Minister Winston Churchill of Great Britain, and representing the United States is President Harry Truman. Now, there are major issues at the Yalta, or I'm sorry, at the Potsdam Conference. And the main issue comes to how to handle Germany once the war is over. Now, at Yalta, the Soviets really insisted on Germany having pretty heavy reparations. And that's because half of those reparations would end up going to the Soviet Union. So if Germany had to pay heavy reparations, the main beneficiary of those reparations, or at least half of those reparations, the beneficiary for half of them, would be the Soviet Union. And Truman, on the other hand, is like, let's rethink this. Truman only wanted to allow occupying nations to exact reparations on their occupying zones only. So let me repeat that. Truman said, look, we will allow occupying nations to exact reparations on their zones only. Now, why would he do this? A lot of people believe that the harsh reparations from the Versailles Treaty in World War I had A, crippled the German economy, and B, had fueled the rise of Nazism in Germany, and they wanted to avoid that at all costs. And so, what were some of the agreements with Potsdam? So, one of the first agreements is a quote, complete disarmament and demilitarization of Germany. So, what does this mean? It means that A, all German industry that could be used for military was to be dismantled. B, all German military and paramilitary forces were to be eliminated. And C, the production of military hardware was prohibited in Germany. So that is a complete disarmament and demilitarization of Germany. Next, they repealed all Nazi era discriminatory laws. So, all laws that discriminated against ethnic minorities in Germany were to be repealed. Next, they also decided that war criminals would be arrested and tried. They also stated that the educational and judicial systems in Germany needed to be purged of all of its authoritarianism. And they also formed something called the Council of Foreign Affairs, or I'm sorry, the Council of Foreign Ministers. The Council of Foreign Ministers, the whole purpose of this organization was to draft peace treaties. And the declaration that is made, or the Potsdam Declaration, is created, I would say, during this time. And it says, it basically calls for the prompt and utter destruction of Japan if it did not immediately surrender. So Potsdam again takes place from July to August 2nd. And then a few days after that, the United States drops an atomic bomb on Hiroshima and on Nagasaki, and that brings the end of World War II in the Pacific. So after this, your next lecture will be on the Cold War, but this information provides necessary context so you know what we're diving into once we get to Cold War America and Cold War Europe. So I'll see you guys soon.